Welcome to this morning's panel session. It's great to see so many of you in person here. This is our third Voice of HR panel session that we've hosted from our Sydney office, but also a big welcome to everyone that is joining us online. We have hundreds of people that are participating from around the country and also in New Zealand today, so welcome to everyone. It's fantastic to see the appetite that we have for these types of sessions as well. Before we start though, I do want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land, the sea and the waters on which you are all joining. And for us here in Sydney today, that is the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. And for those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Joseph Lyons and I am the CEO of ELMO. I only joined the business about 6 weeks ago. So I do feel really fortunate to have been given the opportunity and the privilege to join the company and work with such a wonderful team and a great set of products that I know have real impact for HR professionals. I've also had the chance to speak with many of our customers over the last 6 weeks or so around Australia and also over in New Zealand, but also to hear firsthand what's been on your mind. And the insights I think that I have heard are very reflective of what we're going to hear from our HR industry benchmark report that we're really proud to launch to you all today. And as you know, the report does survey 1,200 HR professionals across Australia and New Zealand to really unpack and understand the challenges, but also the opportunities and the trends that we see are going to unfold before us in 2024. And some of the key themes that we've taken out of it are the economic concerns that all of us have experienced. There are productivity pressures, but also the need for a more sustainable approach to acquiring new skills for the future. And the cost of hiring now sits at a whopping $20,000 plus per hire, and around 1 in 7 employees don't even make it through probation. And what's more, it's now taking new hires even longer to become more productive. So these are pretty eye-opening figures, not just for HR leaders, but for CFOs and executives across a range of organisations. And what it does, it drives home how crucial it is to be strategic in how we hire, how we coach and develop and nurture our talent, and importantly, set up people for success in their careers. The report also highlights another focus area for 2024, and that is productivity, and more importantly, what's holding us all back. It's been positive to also see how increasingly sophisticated ways that HR professionals are now using data and insights to help make more informed decisions and drive strategy. And of course, our ELMO platform can help you with that as well. So I'm super excited to have such a wonderful panel here today of experienced leaders. And they're going to delve into some of the themes of our report shortly as well, and it promises to be a wonderful session. So with that, I'm now going to introduce our very talented moderator for today's event. We have, and she's also a fellow Adelaidean, we just found out, Sunita Gloster. She is a non-executive director for the UN Global Compact Network in Australia, the Principal Sustainability Initiative for Businesses, and also Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. She's also an advisor with Accenture and the co-chair of the Tech Council of Australia's Media and Marketing Committee. She's widely published as an industry commentator and is also a frequent keynote speaker, and many of you have probably even seen her on the ABC's Through and Transfer. She's internationally recognised for her leadership in media and marketing globally, and is also a member of the Order of Australia for significant service to the media and marketing industry, and importantly to gender equality. She's a great friend of ours at ELMO because she's hosted several panels with us previously, and she's a wonderful human being. So with that, I'm delighted to welcome Sunita for our session. Over to you, and welcome to our panellists for today.
Thank you, Joe. I think the first thing Joe needs to start with is some CapEx investment, because this room is not big enough, Joe. I can see people all the way up the stairs and right down. So I'm going to start first by saying I can see at least 5 seats at the front, and this is an hour's session, so you really don't want to be standing up if you can avoid it. So please be brave and come down the front. There's 2 here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 6. So please come, yeah, well done. Come and take a seat. That will keep your hands free to drink your drink and also take some notes if you need to. Thank you, Joe. Let me begin by saying Bujari Gamarawa, hello and welcome. I too would like to pay my respects and my ongoing support to our First Peoples past and present, and particularly to anyone with us today, by welcoming you in the Gadigal for hello and welcome. Today is the third in ELMO's series of The Voice of HR, and I'm delighted to be back for the third time. And today we're going to unpack some themes in the HR report, which all of you will receive shortly. As you all know, and I don't need to tell you, the world of work continues to undergo significant transformation. You know, whether it be the shifting legal environment around DE&I, tech advancements, the pressure of inflation on both the employer and the employee, and the continuing challenges that work from home policies have. But I'm sure if I surveyed the room, you could probably all add another 100 things that continue to give you a very intricate and complex group of challenges as you navigate the HR space. But today, the flagship report is our theme, and it is packed full of both insights, benchmarks, and findings, and we only have time for an hour. So we're going to focus on 4 big themes this year. But firstly, let me introduce the fabulous panel who have agreed to come and unpack some of those themes with us. Firstly, we have Kate Wilkinson, Chief People Officer. Oh yes, please hand that back. Chief People Experience Officer from ELMO. Kate is responsible for driving people strategy across ANZ and the Philippines along with her team. She brings over 20 years of experience from human resources function, from privately owned, ASX listed, major global corporations within tech, FMCG, mining, oil and gas, industrial services and construction sector across APAC and the UK. So a lot of diversity of input expected from you, Kate. With a very different lens to this conversation, Jeanette White, partner of Peoplecorp. Jeanette is one of the owners and partners at Peoplecorp, which is a leading HR recruitment specialist. She also has over 25 years of experience in the recruitment industry and has probably seen many of the themes that we're going to talk about from various sides of the table, from candidates as well as clients, and her own experience. So welcome, Jeanette. And thirdly, Olivia Richardson, I have to say, also from Adelaide, so we love her a lot more. New to Sydney and new to her new role. She's the Chief People Officer for Peter Warren Automotive, so she'll tell us a little bit about that when she kicks off. But her career has very much been through a strong people lens, enabling business strategy and achieving results through people. I know from her varied background that she will have a unique contribution to this panel and really be able to talk to leveraging organisational dynamics to cultivate a culture of collaboration and empowerment. So welcome to Sydney and welcome to the panel, Olivia. So a couple of housekeeping things to start. This session is being recorded and it will be available to you after the session from the comms team at ELMO, and that's when you will also receive a copy of the report. I'm hoping we'll have some time for Q&A at the end, so please save your questions and I'll scout the room in the last 10 or 15 minutes. To the online audience, welcome. A little bit harder to ask questions. I do apologise for that, but there is a chat. So if you would like to post your questions in the chat, I know the ELMO team will come back to you after the event. And the last one is this panel will take about an hour. I know it's the beginning of the day and you're all desperately keen to rush back to the office, but if you would like to stay, you are more than welcome. The ELMO team will certainly be around to talk to you, and I know there's a whole heap of refreshments ready and waiting. So let's start by firstly telling you the 4 themes that we'd like to focus on this morning. The first is navigating today's economy. The second is tackling the productivity predicament. The third is moving from tactical HR to strategic. And the last is how do we embed data into the HR strategy. So Jeanette, I'm going to start with you and maybe if you grab that one, that would be terrific. So we entered 2024 with predictions of sluggish growth, persistently high interest rates, and a very tight talent market. So it's perhaps not surprising that in the report you'll see that the economic outlook is the top challenge as voted by all the respondents in the profession. Jeanette, let's kick off with the volatility and uncertainty in today's economy and what sort of pressure points they're creating for the HR function and the strategy. And if you could start by, firstly, I guess, telling us a little bit about your business, but also what are the conversations that you're having with your clients around talent strategies for this year?
Great, thank you. So as you said, I'm Jeanette White and from Peoplecorp. We specialise in HR recruitment, and that can be from organisations of 20 people up to 20,000 people across all industry sectors, and from emerging talent all the way through to senior roles. So we do get a unique perspective in terms of understanding what's happening in the market. I see actually a varied market in Australia at the moment. You have definitely got organisations that are downsizing and cost cutting as part of that rationalisation with the economic pressure, but there is still elements of growth. I think for HR, the one thing that always stays true in that is organisational design or organisational structure. So that's definitely a focus that I'm hearing when I'm going to speak to people, whether that's positioning organisations for growth or rationalisation. There's a lot of pressure on HR at the moment. The one thing with HR is whether it's a booming market or whether it's an economic downturn, HR has always got a role. And the one now is, we've got a lot of pressure around changes in employment legislation. So we've got a lot of focus on ER, we've got issues around well-being, and there's a lot more focus on psychosocial, and I'm sure that's going to come up in a lot of things that I say today. And we've also, looking at that correct structure in the strategic workforce planning. In terms of talent strategies, and I think you've quoted it in the report, there's the buy, build or borrow. I think the focus that I'm hearing people talking about is more the build or borrow. So using potentially interims that have got specialist skills to fill in gaps rather than taking them in permanently that'll impact headcount, and also just building what you have internally. So again, some of the details they talk about here is in the report is around how long it takes to get people to be productive, and also the cost of recruitment. So why would you not invest in reskilling and upskilling the people that you have in the business currently? Also, is there ways to look at hybrid roles? Does everyone have to be functionally aligned? There's talent management software out there now that can allow you to match skills to tasks and roles that you have in an organisation. So it's just getting more strategic about what you're doing with what you have internally.
Thank you, Jeanette. I'm going to go to you next, Olivia. And I should say that, the report talks from 700 professionals in Australia and 500 in New Zealand. So, and it's hot off the presses. It was only done, the research was done in January. When you read the report in the last few days, I'd love to for you to start by firstly telling a little bit about yourself and where you are now. But what were your first thoughts when you read the report, as probably in this segment? So it's a lot of the mid-market. And then I'll come to talk to you about optimising the workforce.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. First of all, Olivia Richardson, as I was introduced, so new to Sydney, new organisation, so a lot of transition happening in my life. I've spent the last 15 years in agriculture as a Chief People Officer and now moved into the automotive industry. Similar but different. A lot of similarities in culture and optimising workforce of about 2,000 people. Massive on culture and keeping some of the family values where these companies were founded, but helping them transition into a corporate ASX listed environment where it's all about return on capital, return to shareholders. So the other similarities which is relevant to this conversation is very defined segments of the workforce. So I think about the agriculture business I came from. We had everything from real estate sales consultants to scientists who were in fields giving advice on pesticides for weeds. At Peter Warren, similar, we've got financial and insurance specialists through to detailers on cars. So you've got to make sure your P&C strategy is absolutely relevant for all those different segments of the workforce and make sure we're getting bang for buck in terms of the people strategy to help the business reach its ultimate strategy.
So one of the key themes in the report was that cost control measures are, on the top of everyone's agenda. And that's everything from reduction of office space, using more contractors, restructuring. When you hear the words optimising the workforce, what does that mean in what you've seen?
Yeah. So I think there is a bit of a reset going on, right? In terms of we've got record low unemployment, or we have had record low birth rates, ageing population. Like this is just the reality of the backdrop in which we're operating. The legislation is coming at us thick and fast. Cost of living pressures, that's very real for all of us. So I think there is a bit of a reset going on as a backdrop or landscape in which we're all operating. But in terms of our organisation, and again, I think this would be similar for so many of us at the moment and came through very strongly in the report, everybody's thinking about your workforce and are we getting the most out of what we've got? So hard to find people, hard to find good talent. I think the talent war is still happening. The expectation of our new hires on hybrid benefits, that's shifting as well. And so we've got to make sure the people that we've got, we're getting the most out of. But the speed at which things are changing in this environment as well, in the VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguity, it means that we've got to respond really quickly as well. So I think you've just got to be at the forefront of what's going on and making sure that the organisation is responding really quickly to change. And I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit later on with how HR professionals can use data, et cetera, to help us be really valuable contributors to the conversation at the board table.
Kate, let's move to you. I think there were 3 findings in the report that I'm going to try and bring together. The first was the rise in cost of hiring in today's market. So the report sits at around $20,000 per employee. The second is the emerging trend of the struggle to hold on to new recruits, with 1 in 7 leaving pretty much within the probation period. And the third one is the rise in time it takes for those recruits to be fully productive, sitting at 35 days in Australia. When you put those 3 scenarios together, I don't see that as being sustainable at the moment. So what do you think are the, I guess, the next steps or the challenges and the things that this room could really learn from in terms of how to address those 3?
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming in today. I'm Kate Wilkinson, Chief People Experience Officer here at ELMO. Thank you for the kind introduction as well. And I just want to say I've been very fortunate to stay stimulated and challenged over the 3 years I've been in this business across 3 different roles. So what I'm talking about, I've experienced myself, or what I'm about to talk to. And yes, hiring 20K per hire and then to leave within probation and then have to go out and hire again is not going to be economically sustainable for businesses. So for us, we look at option A, option B, option C in no particular order. It's the option to hire. Is it skill development? Or is it internal mobility, lateral moves? What we've done is assess the talent landscape. That's empowered us to be able to make decisions once we've audited the skill sets within the business. And then we've moved to designing and implementing programs to develop skills, career pathways, and really open up the mindset of our managers in the business to be open to their favourite team members going for a lateral move. I speak for the tech industry, and I understand, there are other industries in this room, and I came from industrial services. I know from, it's not as easy sometimes to do this skill development, but I know internal mobility was key, particularly for engineers, for example, that wanted to work on a key project and they might go internationally, and that was opened up to them and it retained them in the business. Where it's, maybe the talent isn't there for a role and the need is to go and hire externally, then we always hear it talked about to do a really positive candidate experience. It's also key to have the employee onboarding experience just as well thought out. We use our onboarding platform from the process perspective, and that keeps it streamlined. That allows us to add the courses and those skills or the understanding of the business on there, but we provide the welcome and we really embed our new employees into the business. We have also, as I've said, done a lot of work on the manager mindset and given them the ability to have conversations, and we're still doing that. Some managers here are still wanting to know more. How can I assist my team members to learn and grow? How can we enable them to have visibility of the roles that are coming up in the business? And we also hold our Elmonians accountable to own their own adventure, as we call it. So it's also up to them to do the work, to put the hand up and to make it known to us. It's not just handed on a plate, and that's not just saying that to Elmonians. Sometimes, that can be the mindset of the employee. I want this, and the work needs to be a two-way street. We've also invested in career pathways. and we hired a senior organisational design manager to bring that to life. And he's working on the competencies attached to the career pathways. He's starting with verticals, but we're also very keen to explore the lateral moves. I know in the candidate market, sometimes we look at wildcard candidates. We want our employees to explore their talent and experiment if they need to in other roles. And then we've created Educate Day. We had our first Educate Day last Thursday, which was super successful. We have an NPS score of +50. The business has told us they really enjoyed it. We created workshops around financial acumen, Excel skills, AI, technology, mental well-being, career fireside chats. And so those are working really well.
Thank you, Kate. I'm going to stay with you for a moment as we move to productivity. Either side of the Tasman, you know, it is the topic of the day. The Australian Productivity Commission found that annual labour productivity growth is the slowest it has been in 60 years. And I know the figures are very similar in New Zealand. Working harder, as we've all discussed, you know, before this, is not the strategy. But in the ELMO report, it pulls out what are the 3 barriers to productivity. And it won't surprise you to hear lack of employee engagement, lack of prioritisation, and lack of leadership capability. So employee disengagement, though, is the most significant of those in the report. What's driving that here for you, Kate, and how are you tackling specifically engagement?
So we've talked about businesses reacting to the economic environment, and then we've got employees reacting to the cost of living. And then there's also change fatigue in workforces where it's been pretty relentless since COVID. And there's no one solution to that, unfortunately, and it's not all on HR to find that solution. But one thing I will say is that business leaders really need to understand that it's both mental well-being and productivity go hand in hand. We've shifted our outlook in terms of the leadership. We talked about the leadership capability, and looking at sports teams, I'm going to call out the Matildas, but you can think about your basketball team. Upskilling our leaders as coaches to empower employees, but also be able to give the feedback, uncomfortable feedback that's with the intention to help them grow. And then also for those teams to optimize themselves. So like the basketball team or the Matildas would, how do they optimize before a game? Are they going to sleep early enough? Are they nurturing and nourishing themselves? Are we providing the right environment for them to optimize themselves in? And on Educate Day, I'll refer back to that, but our hands down favourite speaker was Chelsea Pottinger. She wrote a book called The Mindful High Performer. And I know that people are using the tips and tricks she provided across the business. And that's things like when you wake up in the morning, don't pick your phone up for 8 minutes. Think about your top 3 things that you're grateful for. And it's setting people up in the right frame of mind before they come into the office. Don't look at your phone half an hour before going to bed, because your REM sleep means the neurons in your brain won't work as well, you know? So
I'm just going more guilt in the room just then, by the way, certainly on this panel.
So I'm going to ask our Elmonians in the room who's still using those tips and tricks, and have they found it productive? So that's a key area that's supporting us with productivity as well as well-being. And then we also have EMPS, Employee Satisfaction Score, at the top of our strategy. So the 2 key elements of our strategy are Rule of 40 and EMPS. So we're all responsible across the business for our culture and engagement. We're having regular discussions at an exec level about how we're taking actions and steps to move the needle on our EMPS through listening to our pulse surveys. We're sharing the information with employees at town halls. We're asking the senior leadership team to bring back the nuances around what's disengaging some of their teams, and so we can action those items. And the accountability and transparency has been super valuable. We've actually moved the needle on our ENPS score since the 1st of July by 40 points into the positive as a result.
Olivia, I'm going to come to you. The elephant in the room when we talk about productivity and then employee wellbeing is obviously that they seem in odds sometimes, right? When you look at increasing productivity and maintaining wellbeing. What are the executive conversations you're hearing around that, balancing both of those at the moment?
Yeah, it's tricky, and I don't have all the answers. When I heard this question, I was like, yeah, okay. How do we balance productivity and wellbeing? So it's so tricky. And leaders have got such a challenge, I think, at the moment. So that's where I'm putting the bias of our L&D investment is in leadership development. Because, again, you think about the generations that we're now managing across our workforce, the different expectations around work, and what you get out of that social contract with your employer. You think about the bias of power to the employee. We've got to be really upskilling our managers in change leadership as well, and how we navigate through ambiguity. And so we're almost scared to do our engagement survey at the moment because I feel like results are going to really be quite low. But as we were talking about earlier, maybe that's the time to hear the rock bottom feedback and rebuild from there. And also shifting our expectation that we can't always be riding the highs, that engagement and enablement is going to be, off the charts and positive. So being a bit honest with ourselves about we can't be everything to all people, but this is again where I think sort of segmenting your workforce and understanding the different drivers and motivators is really important, and also making sure that we're upskilling our leaders to be the best they can be, and making sure we've got great succession in place is really important too. So there's some of the conversations that are happening.
No silver bullet, but great segue, Jeanette, to go to leadership development, which has come out as one of the priorities in the report. And we all know, in our own anecdotally as well as in the businesses that we're in, that the capability development now required from our leadership to both influence performance and trust and engagement is higher than it ever has been. When you think about HR professionals and the professional development that you see both in candidates and in requirements in briefs, can you talk to that in this room for a little bit about what the change you've seen, but also where the focus points should be for HR leaders?
I think when you're looking at professional development as an HR person, there's a given that you're going to technically continue your capability and understand what's going on in the landscape. I think the key thing to growing yourself is to understand how you better engage with the business. So if I'm going to get a CPO brief from a client, it can be any kind of organisation, the brief on paper will look almost exactly the same. If I go in, there's normally 3 things that they're looking for. The first one is that trusted advisor, but an executive on the leadership team that's an executive first and the people then second. So they want people that are going to comment on product development. They want people that are going to comment on sales activity. So you need to really get in and understand your business. And if you're not at a level that you're talking at the execs, then just get in and get curious about it. Take a secondment into the business to go and actually work in there so you truly understand what's happening. It'll make it much easier for you to position what you're going in to do. The second thing, and you just mentioned the word navigating ambiguity. So a leader, a CEO is looking for someone that can make decisions without having every single little piece of information because it's always changing. So that's another thing that they're always looking for. And the third is flexibility with your options. So HR, and I think we've moved on a long way from this, but it used to have a really bad reputation of the HR police, or the fact it was black and white. That's not what a leader wants to hear. They want to hear about what their options are and the consequences of those. And often your role is to advise on that, but at the end of the day, the decision does sit with the CEO. I know plenty of people out there that have had to sit back quietly while the wrong decision is made, but you can guarantee the next time when that happens, they're going to come back to you and ask your opinion, and they will listen. So sometimes you've got to fail once to be able to get the win over.
And can I just stay with you and ask you, what is the most significant change you've seen in the role requirement, let's say, if you look at a 5-year window?
It definitely is that the business acumen side is the biggest change. I actually think that the CEO world has come a long way. I mean, we'll probably talk a little bit on this later, but from a productivity perspective, it's interesting. I haven't had a CEO talk to me about productivity as being one of the drivers for bringing this role in. They are talking about retention and well-being. And so I think they understand what's required in order to drive productivity. So I think we've come a long way, and that's been through education and having it. So it's definitely that business alignment rather than being the policy person in the background.
Olivia, if I can come back to you, I think one of the most worrying things in the report is that retention rate, particularly around 14% of new hires not completing probation. Are you seeing that in your own workplace, either in the first 10 weeks or previously? And how are you starting to address that?
Yeah, both organisations actually, and I think ours is as high as a plus 20% dropout in the first year. So that speaks to three things for me. Is one, the hiring choices that we're making. Are managers really equipped with the right skills to be doing this recruitment? Secondly, are they promising what the reality is of the job? So this mismatch of expectations, you've got a great story you shared with me, which I'm sure you'll share later, about just a really obvious part of the job just wasn't explained to the candidate. And the third bit is that onboarding experience, which I think you mentioned, to get that new hire really sticky in the organisation really quickly. And we've moved to doing a lot more inductions of groups so that they've got that cohort to feel not only stickiness to the organisation or the manager, but to this other group that they've joined at the same time with, because naturally there's some commonality there, but also the role of mentors, so that, again, it's not just your line manager or your team. You've got some people outside of the organisation that might help you be more sticky to the business on the long term. Do you want to share your grad story?
Sure. So I worked with a very large organisation that brought in 2 HR grads to do some HR operations in the background. And a week before they were starting, they both got in touch to ask where they would pick up their laptops to work from home. And they're like, it's not a remote role. So you've got theory, but you don't actually have the skills yet. So we'd like you to come into the office. So it's just making sure those expectations are aligned.
Do you know, before we move into tactical and strategic, I'll add my little sample size. I have a daughter that's moved into a university degree, and she has a number of part-time jobs. And one of them, they're all mid-market sort of employers. The amount of care she gets for a 3-hour shift in terms of engagement is extraordinary. They take a cohort that they draw upon from different cohorts in Sydney so that she meets new people, and they take them to fancy restaurants every 2 to 3 weeks because they don't feed themselves, clearly. And she will not leave this job and she only does 1 shift a week, because they take such great care of keeping the social environment around their employees so strong. Not to mention the discounts and the perks, but the well-being around getting together is certainly something that she has noticed. Let's move to tactical and strategic. Right. And I'm going to stick with you, Jeanette, because when we met last time, and I'm not sure how many people were here at the second voice of HR, we talked about a piece of research that said 74% of leaders reported a heightened involvement in their company's strategic planning. However, when you read this report, there is clearly a shift of focus from strategy to tactical, and I think more transactional and operational support coming into the role. When you look at that framework of the balancing act between tactical and strategic, how are you seeing that come through on the recruitment lens?
I think it's really, it's hard to avoid the tactical because that's where the line thinks their pain points are. But I think they need to understand what can be offered from a strategic perspective to get that as well. So I don't think we're ever, if I talk to an HR leader, and I'm sure you'd agree, I don't think there's ever a purely strategic HR role. You kind of need to be in the tactical as well to understand what's happening in the organisation. But it's about taking away the sort of administrative function. So whether you're using AI to do that, so a Harvard researcher now says it's 20% faster if you're using AI, so use that to get rid of some of it. Build a self-service culture, and you need to make it really user-friendly if you're going to get Line to do that. But most CEOs now are actually on board with Line trying to direct some of the more basic parts of the role. And, I think the also talking about how you can streamline processes. So, putting in systems if you can afford that, and running it through that so that you're getting some data out the other side as well. So I think and I also think there's also a bit of a pushback. Like sometimes the things that I've heard people use is, when you're being demanded for these tactical aspects, is to give the person a choice. It's like, I'm working on this initiative at the moment. I can do this for you, but I won't be able to do that. What would you prefer I work on? So not just being the yes person to every demand that comes in.
I think it's clear that HR leaders are not only asked to implement, but also live the strategy of do more with less, because the report certainly finds that a lack of resources is the key reason that HR leaders find it difficult to balance the tactical and the strategic. If I come to both of you and ask both of you this question, feeling overburdened and under-resourced, what are the things that you would give guidance to this room on how you manage that balancing act? And you can make a play for more resources. He's sitting just over here.
We have just had someone great join our team, Helen. But how we're balancing things is keeping our focus on the high priority stuff. I know we've got strategy to keep our senior leaders happy, and then we've got the fires to put out for the BAU stuff, which keeps the workforce happy. But it's really focusing on what's high priority. We often call out to each other if we're getting distracted by low priority tasks, and also people pleasing, calling out people pleasing, because that can get in the way of the focus. We're also looking at, we collaborate as a team. So we've got organizational development talent, and they support the people ops team, who are the HR team as well. So we try and see what they can support with, and vice versa. We're using automation to take the administrative tasks away, so the business partners can truly partner with the business and not get distracted by that. And we also plan, we pull out the trends in the data. We have good relationships with the other departments. We know when their peaks are. Q4 is a big peak for us. So we can plan a little bit more ahead to navigate that.
Yeah. So lots of similarities for us as well. That calendar of events, so you kind of know what's going on business-wise and in your own function. I think understanding the business strategy is really, really crucial, so that you know that your function is going to add value and be on point for the business objectives. Setting your own P&C strategy so that you can, again, that keeps your laser focus when you feel like you are in the firefighting mode, to kind of pull yourself back to, okay, why am I here? What is this all about? But the reality of you've got to be there. There's lots of interesting research on people pleasing and perfectionism, and how that takes us away from actually freeing us up to be a little bit more strategic. But this again is where data is so important. So I've come from an organisation where we had a tier 1 HRIS dashboards readily available, to an organisation where we've got Excel cross-referencing, trying to, data integrity and efficiency issues, which I'm sure is very relatable. And you're just trying to see some, trends, insights. And so what I've just gone with the 80-20, let's just focus on the top 20 roles that have 80% of our workforce. Let's see what's going on there. And then starting to cross-reference your turnover, your engagement scores, your exit interview data, any other data you can get your hands on, to, again, the grievance, fair work trends that are going on, to try and put your focus in the right areas, to be a little bit more proactive and send you to those hotspots to say, I'm reconciling what I'm hearing on the ground tactically with what I'm seeing from the data. And I think that as well helps you spend your time on the most value-add activities. But also that data then helps you measure and feel a little bit more rewarded when you're seeing turnover go from there to there, or engagement from there to there. So combination of those three: business strategy, P&C strategy, plus the data to found it all in. Yeah.
Hang on to the mic for a minute, because I'm going to just pull back on something Jeanette said when we talked about the skill set that was emerging for HR leaders of today and tomorrow. The report talks about the levels of collaboration from HR leaders with other C-suite members as not being as probably as strong as it should be. So obviously the relationship with the CEO and that partnership is clear, but only half of the respondents thought they had a strong relationship with the rest of the C-suite. So where Jeanette pulled out, you know, getting more involved in the product, getting more involved in IT, in the CTO's role. How critical do you see that, and how do you operate when you do that, and what can we learn from what you both of you do?
Yeah, so that was actually my favourite page of the report, was just reading about that collaboration, because it's so true. And again, how do you be a good partner and good value add if you're not spending time along with your colleagues to understand the business ultimately? So the CFO becomes my best friend in a new role, because I want to understand all the business drivers and really build my business acumen so I can be part of those conversations. I understand the customer and be on the floor, on the driveway when the cars are coming in. I've spent time there to understand the roles and the realities of those guys. But also then, how does those productivity measures on the ground, what am I seeing in the board packs and the exec packs and the data there? So I'm asking all the dumb questions. What are the acronyms? What are these ratios? To build my own knowledge, to then be able to contribute to those more strategic conversations and be a real, you know, value add partner. I've gone from an executive team of 14 to one of 4. I kind of like the 4 better, because you can lean in a little bit more to those conversations and have more impact. But I think, again, time out on the ground with the people to, again, sense check some of what you're thinking about or planning for. They'll tell you very quickly if that's a dumb idea or, yeah, a great idea, and that's going to make meaningful difference for us. Kate, would you like to?
I'm just relating. The CFO is my best friend as well. Where are you, James? So I do think that biases can exist in C-suite. HR leaders are super commercial and strategic today. Maybe 50 years ago, there was something there that kind of came through from a reputational perspective, who knows. But it's super important to speak the same language and understand what other functions are doing, as you've said, Olivia, and have those frequent conversations. So James and I are shifting in tandem frequently, responding to business risk and change. I talk to him commercially, otherwise he switches off. I have to. But I also help him with the emotional intelligence part. The people, he's in numbers all the time, so it's not at its forefront. He has got it. Sorry, James, but you know, I'm there with that, and vice versa. I don't have the financials at the front of my mind all the time, and he does the same for me. So we've really developed that relationship, take a keen interest in what all our departments do, and all of our C-suite talk to, you know, value the strengths that we bring to the table, and we have healthy debate where needed and come to resolution.
So it's a nice segue there when we now talk about embedding data into the HR decision-making process. And, you know, the golden thread, I think, through the panel so far has been around being empowered and enabled to contribute to strategic decision-making through measurement, through data, to identify and overcome both the barriers and to improve productivity. And the report certainly talks to some changes in responses. So we're certainly using metrics more. You know, in 2021, there was about 21% of people not using metrics, and that's now just 2%. So that's a fairly seismic change in a short period of time. But Jeanette, if we talk about proficiency of skills, really, around data, that probably in the report was being called out as probably still developing and optimising. When you think about the candidates that you're seeing that have that real proficiency of skills, what do you see?
I mean, there's a specialism in it now. So there are people that are coming out that are data insight analysts. So you can get that. But I think you need to be able to interpret data if you're going to have that conversation at the leadership table again. So you've dealt in HR for a long time, dealt with a lot of unstructured data, which is the kind of, we get a sense of what's going on in the business. And there's still a place for that, because the data has still to tell a story and be interpreted. But you also need structured data to back your argument. So if I'm thinking, even if you're working in a smaller organisation at the moment and you've got a difficulty with getting people to understand that productivity piece, there's a couple of stats even in these slides around how long it takes for people to get up to speed, how much it takes to, or how much it costs to retire, to hire people. So if you look at those two aspects, there's an argument against them using the word productivity as to why they should be spending on other things, because this is the cost it's going to be not to. So you've got to get a bit clever with how you use small bits of data. I do think it's going to absolutely be a skill of the future, as well as using AI. We need to embrace it. It's coming, and if you're not on it, then you'll probably start to fade out in the background. So
Olivia, the report highlights that HR teams are 4 times more likely to be respected by their counterparts through data decision making. There's nowhere to hide in an exec team of 4. So, but when you think about what you're investing in as an organisation and prioritising around data through the HR lens, are you able to, in a non-confidential way, share what that roadmap looks like?
Yeah, very real example, very timely. So, again, like many businesses, things have shifted drastically. COVID, everything's riding high, in fact, both in ag and cars. And then COVID's finished and the business has found itself in a position where, things are not going so well. And so we've got to reshape the workforce. People, your number one cost, what are we going to do? My fellow accountants have sort of taken their ruler and said, well, that's what we need to cut. That's where, and I'm saying, okay, well, perhaps a little bit more analysis needs to back this up. How are we going to start? And again, the data's not perfect, so this is going to take a bit of time. But if we're going to cull some of the workforce to get us a bit more right size, and whatever that means or looks like, what part of the business is it going to come from, and how deep are we going to cut? So what are those revenue, units sold, gross margin per person type statistics that we need to be looking at, so that we're not just making a decision based on tenure, first in, first out type principles, or we don't know them very well, so they can go. So I'm contributing to that conversation, leading the data on that, again with finance. Where can I get this gross margin figures? Where can I get the revenue? Where's the people, as the data, all lining up to start informing some of these decisions, so we don't just say, well, it's 10% and it's all of you over there and you're out. But that's very real for us right now.
So we're at the point where I'm very open to taking some questions from the floor if there are some. So please start thinking about that. I'll put my glasses on so that I can see, but if you can put your hand up if you would like to ask a question, please do. Whilst I'm doing that, a question to all 3 of you. If, we have a mixed group here and online, certainly in terms of where they're at in their careers. If you were mentoring someone to take on that next role, which is, let's say, a very senior ELT role in HR, what are the top 3 pieces of advice you'd give them today in order to make them not only successful but impactful in their roles? Jeanette?
I think it probably comes back to the 3 things I was talking about around that CPO. You need to build your resilience up so that when you're facing those ambiguity moments, you may be pedaling underneath, but you're calm and controlled on the top end. It's really important for the CEO to have the trusted advisor remain calm during those times. Now, it might be afterwards you're sharing a glass of wine and talking about how it went down, but it's really important that they have that. That's how you're going to make yourself known in the organisation. And the other one, as I said, is just that flexibility piece. Like you are that trusted advisor. It is the CEO's decision ultimately of what happens in the business, but you're there to give options and consequences of what will happen. And then, as I said, in the business. So it's the same kind of things that I talked to before. It's not, it's kind of the capabilities that are intangible rather than the technical capabilities, which are kind of given.
3 things for me would be business acumen. So like we spoke about earlier, understand the business, know the business, get in there quick so that you're adding value. Second would be know your data so that, you are making really good recommendations. And the third thing was move quickly. I just think there's an expectation now that we just execute really well and really quickly and not be afraid to fail. So try some things. And this comes back to sort of another data-related example of like employee referral. You would probably all have an employee referral. So tough to find people in COVID. I was looking at the stats around, who's coming in, how much it's costing us, and just dialed up the employee referral fee to $5,000. And that just unleashed a whole lot of people, better retention because it's referred by someone else, So we had to cull it back because it was too much. But being, again, that fast response, fast execution, let's put that in our EVP, it's out, the next day. So that fast, agile, respond to changing environments really quickly.
I am actually going to say similar things to what you've said. Definitely be commercial, emotional intelligence, the soft skills around that, supporting mental well-being for the exec team to every level of employee. Is that two? And data.
I'm just looking around, no hands up. Okay. Oh, yes, there is. Thank you, Kate.
Thanks. As a CFO, I completely resonate with your comments about that relationship between the CEO, CFO and the CPO in terms of trusted advisor. Can you make some comments about cybersecurity and hybrid workforce, given that's become the new norm? You're almost at a competitive disadvantage if you don't, from an attraction and retention perspective. Thanks. And cloud-based software in working as part of that hybrid relationship. Thanks.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity sits with the CFO. Maybe James can come in and answer some of those, but hybrid workplace, it was in terms of supporting the hybrid work framework and productivity levels, I'm assuming. Yeah, okay. We've gone with a hybrid framework of 3-2, but the principles of the framework are about the individual, the team, and the business. The expectation is it's not all about just the individual, that the principles underlying that are we pivot and we move when the business needs us. We might need to come in more when the team needs us, and we need to connect more. We might need to come in more, but obviously the individual needs are taken into account.
Olivia, can you talk a little bit to I saw you smiling when the question was asked around, I'm actually not sure that was a smile, around the cyber aspect of.
Yeah. I'll tell you why I'm smiling is because I feel like we're back in the dark ages. And so not everybody has a laptop. So this agility to go work from home just wasn't an option. So we're in a totally different space. And again, I've come from a business that's probably much more sophisticated in terms of that awareness around cyber. You know, no one's using USBs anymore and all those things. And so all we're doing in our business is, you know, going for the two-factor authentication and the really basic stuff is what I'd say. And so we're not even there. I hear the risk. It's certainly on all the risk registers. Have we got all the answers? No. I think it's such a new and emerging area as well for many businesses. God forbid if there's a cyber attack.
And just to pick up on the second question, which was, I think, around cloud-based software, if you went back to the previous role in agriculture, where were you at on the maturity around that?
Yeah, much, much further. And again, you talk about hot skills and hot talent. We had an awesome, you know, IT security guy who was just, again, bringing up the board, the executive team on the awareness around this, all the simulations around cyber attacks, etc. I feel like having a cloud-based software solution platform gives me some assurance that around the privacy of employee data, customer data, I can only contrast that to where I am, and it is almost like two different ends of the spectrum. And again, we're acquiring lots of small businesses, and this is like a foreign language to them as well. So as I can only say that, yeah, having a cloud-based software provider solution makes me feel a little bit more comfortable sleeping at night, that we're a little more protected. Yeah.
Any more questions live here? I will say that the panellists will stay around for a little bit after this session. So if you do want to come up and have a chat with any of them, please feel free. Or if you want to slip your resume back to Jeanette, I know she's open to take more candidates. I always ask this at the end of every panel because I think all the boats rise when we all share things that are either best practice or great practice, sometimes in our own businesses, but sometimes things we see in other businesses that we wish we could implement in our own. So I'm going to ask each of you for a very quick response before we finish. Any great examples you've seen of programs that are fundamentally wellbeing programs, but that make a significant impact on employee satisfaction and productivity? So it can be from your own business or something you've seen someone else do that you've thought, you know, that was a great idea. I wish I could put that in.
I'll just go first because I've got the microphone. Cool. We thought about wellness on the 4 different segments of, you know, physical, mental, community and financial. And so the physical, you know, the nutritionist and everything, the financial, retirement budgeting, community giving, volunteer days, etc. And then the physical, mental. I think I've missed one of those. But anyway, pretty basic stuff. The thing that I wanted to highlight that I love that we did was create a staff foundation. Donations from staff, to $1 or $2 out of their pay packet every month or week, goes into a pool matched by the employer. And then when other employees are going through times of hardship, they can apply to this staff foundation. And that's then managed by a group of 4 fellow employees, and they then make the decision about gifting in these times of unexpected, medical issues, bushfires, etc. And that just, again, with a remote workforce, just pulled everybody together to and people would share their stories about how this gift of or donation of money has really helped them and their family in these dire times. And it was such beautiful stories that really helped us, cement our values, bring us together as a family, very connected to the community that we operate in. And so I would, if you have the opportunity, I would highly, endorse something like a staff foundation.
I love that. Kate?
I'm going to talk about our Educate Day again. So we borrowed that from one of our private equity firms' portfolio businesses in the US. We borrowed the principles, but it was basically our workforce down tools for the day for a minimum of 4 hours. They could do longer if they wanted. And we provided a lot of workshops. We brought in external speakers. We had internal speakers speak about their own subject matter expertise. We even did the ELMO customer journey. We included our values in that, and it really built engagement, productivity. People are asking for more.
And Jeanette?
So the ones with purpose definitely resonate. I think that's something that comes through, particularly for the generation that's coming through into the workforce now. But what I'm seeing in that psychosocial safety aspect, particularly in logistics and supply chain, is companies focusing on the financial literacy. As we've talked about again, and everyone knows, the cost of living crisis at the moment is an issue, and there is no kind of bigger mental stress on families than the financial one. So the financial literacy is gaining some traction there and kind of taking some of that pressure off, which ultimately should hopefully lift the productivity.
Thank you. That draws our time to an end today. I really would encourage you to download the report and unpack it. We only covered 4 themes that were emerging, but there are a lot of benchmarks around workforce growth predictions, turnover, salary movements, time to fill, cost to hire and train, that I know that you'll find helpful in your C-suite conversations. Please join me firstly in thanking the panel, Kate Wilkinson, Olivia Richardson, Jeanette White. And I'll hand back to Jo now to close this out.
Thank you for such an incredibly insightful and thoughtful conversation. I think everything that you shared was very top of mind for all of our audience, both here in the room and online as well. So I also wanted to say on behalf of the entire ELMO team, thank you to our amazing panellists for your contributions, and also for our incredible facilitator in Sunita. So please give them another round of applause. So also a big thank you to everyone for joining us here today. We know you all have incredibly busy schedules, and we really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us here today. So a big thank you for coming and joining us, and thank you to everyone online as well.